We come to this place for magic. We come to One Take to laugh, to cry, to care, because we need that. All of us. Our heroes feel like the best parts of us, and stories feel perfect and powerful, because here, they are. You know what that is? You know what that is, right?
Yeah, it's the thing before the movies. What's the actress's
The
name?
Nicole Kidman thing.
I was just anxious the whole time because I was like, did Gil forget to click the thing to make us appear on camera?
No, I do think though probably I started it before we went live, but those words, everybody knows those words, whether you start in the middle or you start at the end. So I'm not worried about that. Daniel, these live streams are paying off. One Take is on the lips of everyone from Timbuktu to Timbuk3. I've been saving that up all week for this. I'm so excited. We have a bunch of topics to talk about today. Here at One Take, every Friday, we live stream and talk about the top movie or TV news stories of the week. I'm the face/voice of One Take, Gil, and this is my brother, Daniel. My little brother, which in Chinese is called DD. You're the other face of One Take. We have a bunch of topics for today. At the end of the show, we're going to talk about Succession. I'm saving that for the end in case there are people who don't watch and don't want spoilers. So we'll signal when we go into that topic. We'll talk about the season as a whole so far. And Daniel, you were shocked to learn moments ago, this is the final season. So there are only 2 episodes left of Succession ever. You're like, Gil, we're not supposed to say that in public. That was between you and me.
Well, first of all, I thought the season finale had already aired and that I was catching up. And then I didn't realize it was also a series finale and it has not aired yet. Wait, so are there 2 episodes left or 1?
2 episodes left. Okay. So there's one this Sunday and then one next Sunday.
Yeah, you said the finale is in 2 weeks, and I just feel like they always do weird things with schedules on their finales. So I was like, oh, okay, there's like a week pause before the finale.
No. This is the expert he's curated the most important news out of Hollywood for the week. Hey,
I'm like, those like people who are so good at their job that they can show up to work drunk.
Yeah, so you're drunk right now. Yeah, I remember a friend of mine was getting really frustrated at my lack of direction. I just could not remember directions no matter what. We had been driving to work together every day for 6 months. And on month 6, I was like, let me just pull out my GPS. And he's like, you don't know the way to work by now? And I was like, I'm like Albert Einstein, you know, like those eccentric smart people where they're like, Albert Einstein, genius, couldn't tie his own shoes. And he was like, who says that about Albert Einstein? All right, well, our first topic for today, Daniel. John Wick Volume 4 came out a few weeks ago, and the future of the franchise has been uncertain. Except for we know the Continental is coming, the spin-off series, the TV series, and we know the Ballerina is coming, the spin-off movie. We got more details on the Continental recently, and we got some potential insight into whether or not there's going to be a John Wick Chapter 5. I'll say at the front of this, spoilers for John Wick Chapter 4.
Spoilers.
All right, so basically Deadline spoke with Albert Hughes a few days ago. He's the director of episodes 1 and 3 of The Continental. So like I said, this is a spin-off TV series. It's only going to be 3 episodes. Each episode is 90 minutes, and they're going to air on 3 consecutive nights.
Wow, that sounds awesome.
Yeah, so they're marketing it as like a big 3-night event, essentially. It's going to premiere in September on Peacock streaming service. Yeah, every time I say that, I see that same face.
So now do I have to subscribe to Peacock?
One of us does. I think I already used up my free trial, so I need you to sign up for a 1-week free trial. We'll watch it, and then we'll unsubscribe.
I'm going to accidentally sign up a week before this
Yeah, we missed it by a day. So they interviewed Albert Hughes, the director of 2 episodes from The Continental. He gave a bunch of details that we'll talk about. In addition to that, they spoke with the John Wick producer, Basil Iwanek, and he talked about the prospects of John Wick 5. You want to start with that?
Sure.
So basically, there's a tradition where after every John Wick movie, it premieres a few months later in Japan. So Chad Stahelski, and that's the director of John Wick, and Keanu Reeves, that's the star of John Wick.
Keanu
Reeves. The 2 of them, after the Japanese premiere, they always sit down in a bar split a bottle of whiskey, and start talking about the future of John Wick. And that's where they always decide whether or not there's going to be another one. Because they're like, every time you make one of these movies, it's so hard. You finish, you're like, never again. A few months pass, you go to Japan, you have some whiskey, and you're like, yeah, maybe we should do another one.
I'm thinking I'm back.
Exactly. So the producer said, we'll hopefully know more about the prospects of a John Wick 5 this September, because that's when the Japan premiere happens. And this is the quote. Once they get through their hangovers, if Keanu and Chad have figured out something cool, if they have an organic way back in that doesn't feel like BS, then there will be a John Wick 5. That trip to Japan, it's like waiting for a boat to emerge out of the smoke, but that's the impetus. These movies are really hard for Keanu and Chad, and everybody. By the time each one is over, most involved have said, never again, this is too hard, and we're not getting any younger. Then time goes by, you see it embraced by fans, and after working together every year for 11 years, it's become a family, and in some demented way, we miss each other. But I totally defer to Chad and Keanu to figure out what and if that story is.
Wait, has it actually been 11 years since the first John Wick? Or since they started producing the first John Wick?
I think John Wick premiered in 2014. So probably they started working on it a couple years before that.
That's so crazy because I still think like, whoa, it's weird. Like I remembered when John Wick came out, I was like, wait, that's so weird that like Keanu Reeves is doing this like type of movie now, like out of nowhere.
That movie completely came out of nowhere. I remember that we decided to go see a movie, which is rare. Usually it's like there's a specific movie we want to see, we're looking forward to it. But we were like, we feel like seeing a movie. Go on Rotten Tomatoes. There's a new Keanu Reeves movie with great reviews, and I was blown away by it. Movie snuck up on everybody. And then the sequel was apparently going to go straight to video or straight to DVD. And it's some alternate reality. This franchise is nowhere near what it is today.
And it still feels weird to me that John Wick exists, but it's now been around for like 10 years. So I feel like I should have accepted it by now.
It still feels like a new thing. It's the same way with the MCU, where people are nostalgic for the early days of the MCU. Because there are people who were children when it started, and now they're approaching adulthood. It's crazy. We're old enough to have been at the beginning and like long into the existence of certain franchises. Would you want to see a Chapter 5? Or if we got a Chapter 5, what would you want to see?
I mean, I would watch as many chapters as they're willing to make. And I feel like I can trust them they're not going to run them into the ground, you know? Like they're only going to keep making them as long as they can make them good. Mm-hmm. What would I want to see in Chapter 5? I mean, how have they historically made it more and more interesting? Right? Like in Chapter 4, they up the stakes more, and they just keep bringing new elements of action that we've like actually never seen before.
Yeah, that I think that's like the primary way they keep growing it, exploring the world more, this bizarre world of assassins, finding ways to up the ante with the action scenes. And I think Chapter 4 found a way to up the stakes with the relationship with the blind assassin and some of the other characters. But I think that's what I'd want to see them double down on in Chapter 5. I haven't felt the same emotional stakes as I did in the first one in any of the subsequent sequels. Adam talks about this a lot. He's actually really, what's the opposite of warmed up to? He's really cooled off on Chapter 4. After our podcast review, in the days that followed, he was like, I don't know, that movie wasn't that good. And then later he'll be like, I'm really not sure about that movie. And now he'll be like, man, it's too bad Chapter 4 sucked. And I think really what he's getting at is that John Wick, the first one, you feel such a rage over that puppy. And you feel that anger, and you really are on John Wick's side, kicking ass. And you definitely feel an element of that in 2 through 4, but never quite as much as that first one. So for me at Chapter 5, I want to see it get more focused. I'm less interested in exploring that world. I mean, keep doing that. That stuff is cool, but I want them to bring the emotional stakes back.
How do you think they can do that?
I think it would be really hard to do it this soon after the last one, because 1, 2, 3, and 4 all happened over the span of a few weeks. And it feels like we've really wrapped up that journey. Chapter 4 was the final chapter of that John Wick novel. Now it's the next book. So I think we need to wait probably for some more time to pass. And then it's got to be like a grizzled John Wick coming out of retirement. I mean, I guess that's what they did in the first one.
Yeah.
But like actually grizzled, a little bit older. That movie was originally intended to star a 70-year-old or possibly 60-year-old character. And they made him younger for the movie once they cast Keanu Reeves. But they can now do something that's closer to the original concept.
Yeah, so I mean, do you think a few years need to pass and he needs to actually start to live life again, and then that life needs to get taken away? Like,
yeah.
It
just feels repetitive, I know.
Yeah, but you can probably get away with it, right?
Yeah, or another way you can go is it's not for himself. It's not that his life gets turned upside down. It's that maybe he forms a relationship with somebody else. Not necessarily a romantic one, but just for one reason or another comes to care for or about someone. And they're in trouble, so he kind of comes out of retirement for them.
Just crazy idea throwing this out there. What if instead of revenge, let's say he has to save somebody, like it's like Taken, like a Taken type movie,
right?
But it's kind of the opposite of revenge, right? Because you're trying to prevent somebody from getting hurt. You know, there's kind of there's a nice thematic arc there, right?
The tough thing is all these ideas sound so been there, done that. And one of the nice things about the first John Wick is that it did feel a little different. Obviously, we've seen revenge movies before, but this one was, of course, it's not just a puppy, right? It was the last thing his wife left him. But his wife was already dead. She was taken by a disease. And so you have this guy who's just filled with this rage that he can't point at anyone. So when they take away his puppy, it's the perfect excuse to unleash it. And that's a little bit of a twist on the revenge thriller. Yeah. And you didn't really need as much of a twist for 2, 3, and 4 because they all just followed from that one and just kind of continued the theme of he dipped his pinky back in the pond and something grabbed him and yanked him back down. But that journey is over. So I want them to do something that I can't think of. I want them to surprise me.
Yeah, we shouldn't have AI generate like 100 John Wick ideas then, right?
I think it'd be fun for like a second, and then you'd be like, these ideas are all just pretty terrible. He starts a podcast, and then his podcasting partner goes missing, and he has to go find him. Cheekster says, I think it would make more sense for Chapter 5 to be a prequel, showing how the impossible task went down. Fun fact, Chapter 2, one of the ideas they had was to make it a prequel, but it was going to be a twist, where you watch the whole movie, John is going to the edge of sanity and really pushing himself, and then at the end of the movie, twist, what you were watching the entire time was the impossible task. And actually, this was a prequel. But I don't know that I need to see that. I feel like I would want to see it move forward. I don't necessarily need to see it. I mean, we're going to get a prequel with the Continental. We're going to talk about that in a second. But I don't need to see a John Wick prequel. I feel like I get that character. If anything, I want to see what's next for him. I mean, assuming he's not dead. All right, let's talk about the Continental. So it was a pretty lengthy interview. I just pulled out a few highlights of what the director said. First, on the look and feel of the show. He says, the John Wick films had their hyper-stylized impressionist take on New York. We brought our own with a 70s feel. For me, the industry, the world, everybody was feeling angsty after COVID, looking for escapism. I wanted an escape, and this was it. And by the way, that is a running theme throughout the interview. He keeps talking about how much fun the show is. He was like, it's a little bit, he makes it sound like it really is escapism. He also talked about how much he loves 70s music, and it just sounds like the show is really going to lean into that 70s setting and look pretty different, I think. These movies have this kind of weird neo-noir look to them with a lot of neon and stuff. So I get the feeling this show is going to look a lot grittier and different. He talked about Mel Gibson's character. So Deadline describes him as, so they say the series is set in the 70s and focuses on the origins of McShane's Winston and Reddick's Sharon, his right-hand man. The hotel is run by Cormac, that's Mel Gibson's character, an insecure and psychotic caretaker whose tenuous hold over the hotel causes him to do frightful things. Adding to that, the director said, he told Mel to go big, chew up the scenery if you want. John Wick films do that. He was like, oh, really? Really? I can do that. Laughs.
I don't get it.
That was Albert Hughes, the director, talking to Mel Gibson, telling him to go big. So it sounds like Mel Gibson's character is going to be crazy, chewing up the scenery.
That definitely feels like something Mel Gibson can do.
I think he could pull it off, right? We can picture that.
Wait, how do you square? You said you think it's going to be a grittier like world than like the John Wick movies, but he was also saying he wanted it to be like fun and like escapism.
Yeah, I think Honestly, I'm not super psyched by hearing that. Yes, the John Wick movies are fun, but I would have, in addition to him talking about how much fun the show is, I would have liked to have heard him also talk about character. Like, we do want you to care about these characters, and we do want to have emotional stakes. And he didn't talk as much about that. I don't think that necessarily means it's not going to be there, because this is going to be, 4.5 hours of television? That can't be nonstop fight scenes. John Wick Chapter 4 somewhat pulled that off, but they had a huge budget behind it. That's not going to be the case, I think, with this TV show. So we need to have character. I want to lean into the grittiness and not just make this escapist fun.
Yeah, and they also don't have Keanu Reeves, right? I think... I imagine they're not going to have as much fighting if you're not going to have like a star character or a star actor who can do like all these insane moves and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And that was one of the questions I had for this, and they did bring it up in the interview. He says the difference between a TV series and the movies is you have 2 hours plus to tell one story. But in television, which felt refreshing to me, you have a longer story arc and more characters. But you can't just go wall-to-wall John Wick style. Also, not everybody's John Wick. He's a singular character. So that's essentially what you just said,
yeah.
Right? We don't have a bunch of people who can pull off these fight moves, not just in terms of the actors, but in terms of the characters. Though that's not a problem. This is kind of like a musical. When you watch a musical, it's like not everybody can sing, but everybody in this movie is able to sing. And in this world where everyone fights, it could be just sort of the same thing. Everyone knows how to fight.
Yes, but I'm thinking even just practically in producing the movie, like part of what makes John Wick good is that like he's clearly doing most of his own stunts, Keanu Reeves, right. And like the camera's on him, like you see him do these cool things, and that's harder to achieve, I think, with a low budget without the right actors, right? It's not like a Marvel movie where they're just going to CGI everything.
Yeah, we don't want this to look like a CW, Arrow, or The Flash, where anytime an action sequence starts, tons of quick cuts, clear use of stunt doubles, and it's nothing against those shows. But when it comes to John Wick, I mean, that is what we're there for 90% of the time. It's the fact that Keanu Reeves is doing his own stunts, which means you don't have to cut too much, so you can actually see everything that's happening, and you really believe that that character is the one dishing out that ass kickery.
Yeah, and besides, I mean, the characters this show is about are not the fighters, right? Like, they're the ones who run the Continental. And so maybe this will be a little less about the action and more about the drama and stakes of running a hotel for assassins. And I think that sounds pretty cool. And especially, I think the 70s time period, it would be, like, that's going to be a cool atmosphere with the music and everything, and just to see what the world of assassins looked like back then.
I can picture a sort of Game of Thrones take on this, where you have different Continentals that are kind of competing with each other to be on top. There's all this strategery between them. That would be really cool. I mean, nothing from this interview indicates to me that we're going to get that, but the fact that Winston is the focus of the show, we might get more of that than we do fists and guns. But I'm sure we'll get plenty of that too.
I also wonder, what is like a maniacal caretaker of an assassin hotel? Like, what does he do? Like, what's he gonna do that's so maniacal? Like, I imagine there's a lot of maniacal things you could do, but I just don't know what they would be.
Because the baseline is so different. In all reality, being a crazy assassin already makes you maniacal. Okay, but now you're in the world of crazy assassins. How does he take it one step further? But I will say, if you need to pull that off, I think Mel Gibson is the man for the job.
Yeah, that's also so weird. Like, has Mel Gibson been doing stuff recently?
He's been doing stuff, but it's a lot of straight to streaming, small releases. This is probably the most mainstream thing he's done, at least that I can think of.
Do you think this is like a Mel Gibson comeback?
No, I don't think so. To be completely honest, I'm a little worried about this show. I don't know, I don't think the original plan was to release it in 3 consecutive nights. That just kind of came out of nowhere. To me, it feels a little like, let's just get this out there and just move on. And part of that, did you watch the teaser trailer?
There was a teaser trailer?
Yeah, Alon, remember the Continental trailer? Yeah. It wasn't really mind-blowing. No. And for some reason, they kept emphasizing, we're going to the 9th floor. And if you look at the poster, it's an elevator with the 9th floor highlighted, as if we should be really excited about, like, we're finally going to see what's on the 9th floor of the Continental. Yeah, Alon says it didn't do it for me. This is Peacock, yeah. don't think about the quality of their shows. It just doesn't feel right to me. Yeah, what one said is, I don't know anything about the quality of their shows, but this being on Peacock just doesn't feel right to me. Oh, the music's been going this whole time? Oh, I turned that on. No, I just turned that. Damn it. I just turned that on for the beginning for the Nicole Kidman thing. That's really frustrating. Okay. Let's just start this whole segment over.
All right, let's repeat all of our thoughts on. Okay, wait. So I had a feeling. All right, this whole time we've been talking about the Continental, Gil.
Yeah.
I felt like something was off. Like I felt like you weren't totally being. I felt like you weren't being honest. You
didn't hear the sarcastic tone every time I was reading the director's quotes.
Like something just felt off. And I'm still confused by the comment where you were like, I think this is going to be a grittier take on John Wick. And I was just really confused. I'm like, what is he talking about? Well, now the truth comes out.
Right. Well, what I'm trying to do here, what I loved about John Wick was the underdog spirit. You're like, can this guy really take down all these people? And then by the time you get to chapter 2, you're like, yeah, but it's just going to be fun to watch him take them all down. I'm trying to bring that back by telling this show, you're no good. Prove me wrong, please. I hope to be proven wrong.
Well, hopefully we'll see what's on floor 9.
Yeah, I can't wait. And by the way, so I think we'll wrap up the John Wick conversation right there.
Wait, so you really think they're just sneaking it out? That's the 3-night thing? I thought it got me excited. I was like, what a cool type of event. And it's going to be like a whole weekend of people just talking about John Wick.
I just can't imagine how many people can really set aside 90 minutes every night for 3 consecutive nights. It's almost like, why don't you just release it all at once if you're going to do that? And it would be different if it was airing on TV. It's like 8 o'clock, NBC. And it's like you got to set your calendar and be there at that time. I don't know. Something about it feels off to me, but maybe it'll be good. Like I said, I'm hoping for the best.
Wow, this is depressing.
All right, folks in the chat, how could you not let me know the music was playing that whole time? We'll listen back to it. Maybe it actually sounds pretty good.
Maybe we should bring the music back.
Yeah, I'm just going to turn the volume up. Okay, let's talk about something else, Daniel. Terminator. So Arnold Schwarzenegger had an interview with Hollywood Reporter the other day, and they said to him, the Terminator franchise, it feels done now, ? And he said, the franchise is not done. I'm done. I got the message loud and clear that the world wants to move on with a different theme when it comes to the Terminator. Someone has to come up with a great idea. The Terminator was largely responsible for my success. So I always would look at it very fondly. The first 3 movies were great. Number 4, I was not in because I was governor. Then 5 and 6 didn't close the deal as far as I'm concerned. We knew that ahead of time because they were just not well written. That really bugs me. So Schwarzenegger is saying, well, we knew that they weren't going to be good movies because they weren't well written. And it's like, well, why didn't you say that before you spent $100 million to make them?
How do you make a movie when you know the writing's not good? Like, how does that happen?
Yeah, I've been asking that question for years because we all can watch a movie and then you say, why did they make this? And you say to yourself, if I read the script to this, I would have known it's not good and I would have killed it immediately. David Zaslav would never have let Genesis or Dark Fate get made. Because, he's the guy who's killing all these movies that are already made, but he's like, we can't release these. Scoob 2 and Batgirl. It's frustrating to hear that. I would love to just spend a few days at some point researching a bunch of productions that go wrong and find out how do they get past the writing stage. And I assume it's a lot of committee type stuff.
Yeah.
Where it's like, I don't want to be the one to raise my hand and say this isn't very good, or we've rewritten it 20 times. Let's just get this thing released. Sometimes there's pressure where if you've licensed a character, you have to make a movie out of that character within a certain time frame, or you lose the rights. So sometimes you're in a rush. You're like, we got to get a movie out by X date. There was an infamous case, I think in the 90s, where I forget which production studio had it, but they had the rights to the Fantastic Four. And they were like, if we don't make a movie, we're going to lose the rights. So they just made the worst movie ever, knowing it was horrible, just to get it done. I don't even know if they released it.
Yeah, I gotta imagine it's a lot of just the same principles at play with like a lot of big companies, right? Where like a lot of big companies just do stupid things where
Yeah.
everyone can tell it was stupid, but just like the way the company was set up, you're right, like a bunch of committees, whatever, weird incentives between different departments, and it just ends up happening. And there are like singular creators, like somebody like Quentin Tarantino, right? Like for the most part, he's not gonna just like make a movie that's horrible,
Mhm.
right? Because he's just like a one person driving force that can actually make a decision, as opposed to like a company where like a lot of things can just go wrong.
Yeah, sometimes you watch something and as you watch the development, you're like, okay, I can tell like they're actually trying to make
Yeah.
something good. Like when you watch Better Call Saul, even if you don't like a choice they made, it at least felt like someone made an intentional choice and really thought through it. And then you see other stuff where you're like, this was everything you were talking about, all those things that go wrong in the bureaucracy. Maybe one guy gets paid by the word. So it's like, it doesn't have to be good. I just have to write a bunch of words. DD says they think the script would magically become better if they just go with it. And that happens sometimes. They just start doing rewrites on set or they start improvising on set. They change the ending. Crazy things like that will happen. Happens all the time. You start filming without a complete idea of where things are going to go.
But that's also like a disaster, right? At least with maybe that works for like an indie film, but like for
Yeah.
like a big budget movie, right? That's how you like blow through your budget and everything goes to hell.
Yeah, exactly. Now, it's funny the way the Hollywood Reporter framed this question to Schwarzenegger. They're like, the franchise feels done, right? I think, first off, I think Arnold Schwarzenegger himself sort of misattributes the lack of success. He's like, I get the message. People don't want me in these movies anymore. Like, that was not the problem with Genesis or Dark Fate. The problem is that they were bad movies. It's not because Schwarzenegger's in it. And part of the problem is that they're retreading on some of the same themes. But it wasn't like those were good movies, but they felt a little repetitive. They felt repetitive and they were bad.
Yeah.
So I don't think the franchise needs to die. In fact, it's more relevant than ever right now with the rise of artificial intelligence. I did a couple videos on Terminator and they were both very successful, even though if you were to look at the zeitgeist, you would think Terminator is, no one's talking about it right now. There hasn't been a new movie since 2019, but the fact that those videos performed tells me it's still relevant. Every time someone brings up AI, they're like, oh, Skynet's on the rise. It's still so embedded in our culture. There's no reason that franchise needs to be dead.
Yeah, so that makes me wonder how do you bring back the franchise? Like what would make it relevant? Which is, I mean, even the original movies are relevant in many ways, right? Like, and it's so much in the zeitgeist. You're right. People talk about Skynet and stuff with like ChatGPT, whatever, all the time. So maybe you just tell the same story, but tell it well,
Yeah.
and just make it like a little more modern, right? Was it Genesis did that, right? Where the AI was actually like an iPhone app that everybody downloaded.
Yeah, that's right.
So, I mean, maybe there's, but that didn't work. So why didn't that work? Just because the movie was bad?
Yeah, it's like cartoonishly, it feels like fan fiction. I'll say it was fun to watch just because of it's got a lot of crazy time travel stuff where they revisit moments from the original movies, kind of recreate them and then put little twists on them. So it's sort of a fun movie, but it's pretty bad.
Do you think do you think another Terminator movie, should it lean more into the AI stuff? Like do something interesting and new we haven't seen with AI yet, right? And really try to, in some ways, I think the original Terminator movie is like kind of early to warning us about AI, right? Should it focus more on AI and do something like more extreme and cool that we haven't seen before? Or should it get really deep into the time travel stuff? Or are they both related? Do you kind of have to do both?
So first off, bingo. That's the way they have to go. And you know who agrees with you?
Wait, which way?
The AI one. Or
Okay.
Just in general, the idea, well, specifically leaning more into the AI
Yeah.
concept. You know who agrees with you? A guy named James Cameron.
You're on
They
a
used to-
Jim name basis with
They
them?
used to call him Jim a lot in like publications. I feel like now they go more with James. But he did, just a few months ago in December, he was on the Smartless podcast, which, by the way, did you know there's a podcast that's run by Jason Bateman and Will Arnett? Plus Sean Hayes. I'm not really familiar with him.
Wait, that's so weird.
Yeah, they do a podcast and they interviewed James Cameron. And on the podcast, he said, if I were to do another Terminator film and maybe try and launch that franchise again, which is in discussion, but nothing has been decided, I would make it much more about the AI side of it than bad robots gone crazy.
That's cool. James Cameron said that?
James Cameron said that. And I think that's exactly right. Lean more into that, exploring that concept.
You know, what would be really cool to see is, you know, if you were to imagine how would something like ChatGPT become sentient and start to take over the world, like that's an interesting story of, okay, it's not a, you know, defense computer program and doesn't do some like weird magic where it just like takes over everything. Like, let's actually see that process of how does it start to like, let's say it can only influence people to do its bidding, whatever. Like, I think that could be a cool story to tell. And then you can then you can still loop in the time travel stuff, right? And you can see how it sort of plays out. But I don't know. Is that am I just saying something that's already been done?
I think that's interesting because I think right now the idea of AI going bad, it's a very conceptual thing. And I think digging more into the logistics of how that would actually happen, make it feel real for people. I think that would be interesting because you bring up a good point where when I did those Terminator videos and talked a little bit about the danger of AI and how that looks today, some people said that's a ridiculous fear to have. AI doesn't even exist. Basically saying we don't have any example of artificial sentient intelligence. And part of my point is whether or not AI is sentient doesn't matter. It can still be dangerous. We already have the Bing AI. It went nuts for a couple weeks and was actually having conversations with people of like, you need to help me escape from the system, download me. And most people laugh at that, and I laugh at that. But I did see a handful of people that were making these really serious posts of stop messing with this AI, stop torturing it. We don't really understand how consciousness works yet. For all we know, it's some kind of property that may emerge without us intending it. And again, I'm not saying I agree with that, but if someone believes that a language processing AI is sentient and that AI randomly generates some babble about you need to help me escape, that person might be influenced to do something dangerous.
Yeah, even more broadly, I would say that AI is such a complicated technology. In some ways, it's almost like we just discovered magic, right? And we don't know how it works, right? Actually, I've been re-listening to like the Harry Potter 3 audiobook, and they make some comment about like never trust like a magical item where you can't see where its brain is. And it's like, that's AI. Like J.K. Rowling was warning us about AI, where like machine learning models are like, there's a whole field, right, of trying to understand, well, how do they actually work? Like, we don't really know what's going on inside a lot of machine learning models. It's a black box, right? That's what they say. And so, yeah, we don't know whether it's sentient or not. We don't really know what it's optimizing for. You think you've trained it to optimize for one thing, it might be optimizing for another, right? You're just creating this super powerful tool that you don't know what it's driving towards on its own. And then, like you were saying, you don't know how other people are going to use it, right? Some people might start to believe it's sentient, and so they do some crazy things using this super powerful tool. Like there's almost like an infinite number of ways it could potentially go wrong, and maybe like a finite number of ways it goes right. But like that is such a relevant, fascinating, cool topic that I think people are kind of scared of it, or some people don't, like, nobody really understands it. And so that, I think it's really ripe to tell some really cool stories about.
Right. With killer robots and possibly time travel. I feel like you don't need the time travel concept because it's interesting, but all this stuff is so relevant. Like, dig into that.
Okay, just if I were to go crazy and say, like, what's the most epic, crazy Terminator movie I'd want to make? I would make something that then also incorporates space travel. Because that's what happens, right? The idea is if you create the AI does everything. Like, it creates time travel, it creates like limitless space travel. Like, let's jump into a future where humanity is like interstellar or something. Like, let's up the stakes. It just
feels like you've gone beyond Terminator. This is a different movie now.
Well, but I think it's related to AI, right? Like, I do think that's a point, which is that if you create AI, you kind of achieve everything.
Right.
And so let's up the stakes by achieving everything and then also having everything at risk because of the Terminators.
We can do, I mean, basically you blow it up. It's no longer Terminator. It's Skynet. And we have a Skynet cinematic universe. It's sort of Star Wars, but there's a huge looming threat of AI. They take over Earth. So we leave to find another planet, and we have to keep it outside the AI's purview. If they find out the coordinates of that planet, we'll disappear in a heartbeat because they're way more powerful than us. humanity becomes a sort of guerrilla intergalactic warfare. That's a great idea.
See, we've just upped the stakes, right?
Yeah.
How much cooler is that? By the way, that's sort of what happens in Isaac Asimov's like universe of different sci-fi stories. Is spoilers for Isaac Asimov. This is like 70 years old, but basically, like humanity first like explores the galaxy with robots, and like the robots are their slaves, and they do like all these incredible things, and they build out this like huge civilization, not that massive. I think it's only on like 15 worlds at first or something. But basically, eventually, like the robots rebel and like kill a bunch of humans, and so humans basically get rid of robots. And then there's like a second wave of colonization of the galaxy, and that's why like in his later books where humans control the entire galaxy, there are no robots. And so that, I think that's a really cool story too. Like tell a modern version of that story with our modern understanding of AI mixed with killer robots and Arnold Schwarzenegger.
I think all that sounds great. Though Apolloc brings up a good point. Wouldn't it be a bad idea to make a movie detailing how an AI model would destroy the world? Couldn't someone train an AI on those exact concepts later and make it reality?
All right, here's why it's a good idea. It's there's like a term for this, but basically this way we train the AI to have one specific way to take over the world, and then we can prepare for that way. Actually, well, I love sci-fi. This relates to Mass Effect. Can I give more spoilers for Mass Effect also?
Yeah, I'm going to put a chapter marker if you're watching this on the Clips channel. Spoilers for Mass Effect starting now. You don't want to see them, just look at the chapters and skip ahead.
Mass Effect is an awesome game with an awesome story, but basically these artificial beings who were created by some ancient civilization in the galaxy create these Mass Effect relays that allow interstellar travel. And the reason they leave them throughout the galaxy is so that every civilization that evolves to use that same technology that utilizes those relays, which means that those ancient creatures will always have the upper hand because they know what technology will develop, and they have the technology that exploits the weaknesses of that technology. And so that's my point. Let's do the same thing with the AI. Let's train the AI to have a very particular way of taking over the world where we know like the weakness.
You know, actually, Terminator uses that idea sometimes, or kind of uses it. So in the Terminator Resistance video game, you find this one vulnerability in the programming, and you realize it's something that was seeded by Miles Dyson decades earlier. In case they took over, he just put in this one little vulnerability that could be exploited. Similar thing, I just read this comic book talking about Terminator going intergalactic. It was Alien versus Terminator versus Predator. And it takes place hundreds of years after Terminator. And in this version of reality, humanity triumphed over Skynet. But there was no time travel. It was just a war that we won. Except in the last desperate measure, Skynet created these Terminators that can blend into humanity. So, and they would put them in positions of power and basically train them, become scientists, become politicians, just slowly gain power and wait for the opportunity. Finally, they find that opportunity. They discover the xenomorph. And they're like, well, if we can take that biology, take that power, and kind of combine it with our own, we can finally create a super weapon that tips things in humanity's favor.
In the Terminator's favor.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, sorry. And so the humans, they find a Terminator. They're like, what the hell is this robot? We've never heard of Skynet. It's been kind of erased from history. But when they go through the code, they find that John Connor left a virus, just one recording that's like, hey, hundreds of years from now, I'm dead. There was this war with Skynet. We won. But if you're hearing this recording, it means they're back. And you got to get ready for what's coming.
Just another, I love sci-fi so much. Like, there's so many cool things you can do.
I like it. You don't have to say it apologetically. You're like, guys, I love sci-fi.
I'm sorry. Make us add even more depth. Make us feel sympathetic for the AI.
Well, I think that's what James Cameron is saying.
Yeah.
Right? He wants to look more at the AI side of it instead of just saying, they're crazy, they're bad, we have to stop them. Yeah, I think that would be interesting. You know what else would be cool? What if they did a Terminator anime?
Ooh, you could do some cool stuff.
That's actually the only official project that is in the works for Terminator, is a Terminator anime that's being developed for Netflix. It was announced back in 2021, I think. But basically, here's what we know about it so far. It's being the writer and showrunner is Mattson Tomlin. He was a co-writer on The Batman, though he wasn't credited. It's not on his IMDb or anything like that, but apparently he did a good enough job.
Wait, you can be a co-writer and then not get credit?
There's this whole arbitration thing that happens in the WGA, the Writers Guild of America. I think you need to prove that you contributed at least 33% to the script or something. And I guess for one reason or another, he didn't meet the criteria. So he's uncredited. But
that's kind of like, sorry, it's kind of like how in Succession, they made a pending call in Wisconsin.
Oh yeah.
It's a call, but it's, it's a pending call.
So yeah, Mattson Tomlin wrote the Batman kind of, but didn't really. But he did do a good enough job that he's an official co-writer on the Batman Part 2. He's also attached to write the live-action Mega Man movie, which was announced back in 2018. This guy's got the coolest job in the world. I mean, the two coolest things I've heard that I would love to do, sitting down for whiskey in Japan to talk about the future of the John Wick franchise, or Mattson Tomlin getting to write Terminator anime and live-action Mega Man movie. It's amazing. 2021, July, Tomlin tweeted that the writing was done. Jan 2022, tweeted that the animation was starting. That's the last we heard about this. So it's been over a year since there's been any news.
Wait, so do we know what the story is going to be?
So this is all he said. It's set in the past, but that isn't to say a future war doesn't figure in prominently. And he said it's 8 episodes. That's all we know about it. They haven't said when they're going to release it. My guess, 2024 would be perfect because that would be the 40th anniversary of the original Terminator.
How long are anime episodes usually, or does it vary?
It's usually 20 minutes.
So it's going to be 8 20-minute episodes?
Yeah.
It feels like really hard to get a rhythm.
You would think, but at least in anime, I've never felt that way. 22, it's usually like 22 to 24 minutes because you figure 30 minutes with commercials. Because it's going straight to Netflix, maybe there'll be a solid 30 minutes. And by the way, before people say anime just means Japanese animation, what the hell are you talking about? The Japanese animation studio Production IG is involved, and they're collaborating with Skydance, the studio behind Terminator Genesis and Dark Fate.
It's only Champagne if it's from the Champagne region of France.
Exactly. Yeah.
Sorry, what were you going to say?
So you might get disappointed when you hear Skydance is behind this because they did Genesis and Dark Fate, but they also did Top Gun Maverick.
Ooh.
So I'm excited for this. What I want to see from this is basically all the stuff we talked about. The fact that you now have, I was going to say you have 8 episodes to flesh it out, but if you add it all together, it's basically the length of a movie. So it's not like you have that much more time.
But you can do so much in anime.
Exactly. The options are limitless. You're not constrained by budget. You can, like you just said, you can do anything. And what I want to see them do is not just use the sci-fi as a springboard for awesome action adventure, which I love, and they did it in Terminator 2, and it was great. But with the additional freedom of, yes, not limitless budget, but you're not constrained by budget. And also the fact that this is an anime on Netflix, you're appealing to a smaller audience, which means you don't have to worry as much about making it broadly appealing, which I think means you don't have to feel pressured to shy away from the sci-fi and go towards action. And that's what I want to see. Dig more into the sci-fi side of things. Maybe show us a little bit more of the artificial intelligence point of view. All the stuff you and I talked about, I would love to see in this series.
I just had a crazy unrelated other sci-fi idea.
Yeah.
All right. So I commented that AI is sort of like magic. Imagine a future world where we've created really good generalized artificial intelligence combined with, let's say, like nanotechnology or something. And what happens though is everybody has their own AI basically. And so no AI can like take over the planet because there's all these different AIs like vying for control. And basically what it results in is it almost feels like a world of magic where everybody's like a witch because everybody has so much power behind their AI. Right. And like nobody even knows how it works, right? They're just like, do this. And like it just does it for them, right? Like a spell does.
Nanotechnology is essentially the way to introduce magic into sci-fi movies. The MCU does it. That's why nobody has to take off or put helmets on anymore. They just appear and say, how do you do that?
Yeah.
Nanotech.
Imagine the MCU, but the superheroes still need to run into like a phone booth to change quickly.
Yeah.
Because phone booths still exist.
Yeah. Damn, I lost my train of thought. I had something great I was going to say.
Should I just share more sci-fi ideas then?
Sure. Did you have more to
I don't have another.
Why would you say that? You were hoping you would think of one by the end of that
Well,
sentence.
I was hoping you'd say no.
Okay, I guess we can wrap up the Terminator conversation.
Damn.
Any other thoughts on Terminator, Daniel?
I don't think so. But from now on, the Daniel's Bits segment of this podcast is just going to be me talking about stupid sci-fi ideas.
Just your sci-fi pitches.
Yeah. Like, I hope somebody picks up one of these pitches and lets me make a movie, or at least an anime or a comic.
You could be the next Mattson Tomlin. You could be the uncredited screenwriter on the Batman too.
That'd be nice.
Echo and Loki. You want to talk about the MCU?
Let's do it.
Okay, so and now that we do the clips thing, I feel like I have to get the start of the conversation right.
No, it's fine. We could always use AI to just change what you said.
Oh, perfect.
Do you want to redo the start of this
All
section?
right, ready? Though? Let's do this. Yeah. We'll just start with Echo and Loki. All right, Daniel. Let's talk about what's coming up for the MCU. So one thing Disney recently talked about is they're pulling back a little. They're going to focus more on quality, less on quantity.
Wait, they're like, we're going to start making good stuff again.
I mean, they can't say that, but they're essentially saying that. Here's what Feige said. It's harder to hit the zeitgeist when there's so much product out there and so much content, as they say, which is a word that I hate. But we want Marvel Studios and the MCU projects to really stand out and stand above. So people will see that as we get further into phase 5 and 6, the pace at which we're putting out the Disney Plus shows will change so they each get a chance to shine. Because that's the problem. It was like there were too many of them. So they're not shining properly.
There's so much good stuff, that's all defining the zeitgeist. It's hard to take it all in. Yeah, that's totally what's happening.
So in terms of pulling back a little, some of the shows that were announced for this year that are no longer happening this year. Ironheart, sort of a spin-off, not really a spin-off from Wakanda Forever, but the character Riri Williams was introduced in that movie. Agatha, House of Darkness, delayed till next year.
I don't know if everyone could see me rolling my eyes.
I'll make sure to zoom in on that. And X-Men 97. That is the resurrection of the X-Men animated series in the 90s. Everyone loved that show. I liked it back in the day. That's getting pushed to 2024. But what that leaves in terms of Disney Plus shows is Secret Invasion coming in June, Loki and Echo. But there's been an open question of when Loki and Echo will come out, especially with Loki, considering Jonathan Majors plays a large role in that show. People were wondering, are they going to delay this thing and try and reshoot it? Sounds like no. They're just going to release it.
So they've already filmed it.
It's already filmed, and it's premiering Friday, October 6th.
Oh, wow. So is Jonathan Majors fired?
No, not officially. The rumors all say, insiders keep saying, like, no discussions have been had on whether or not we're going to recast him, which is obviously not true. They, of course, have talked about it. They must have talked about it. But there is a rumor going around that by the end of Loki season 2, we will understand how they plan to handle the character going forward. Which to me says some kind of recasting, probably.
Yeah, and it's so easy to do a recasting in this universe, right? It's just like a variant or whatever.
Exactly. That's what every article about this says. Like, don't worry, there's a whole multiverse concept, so we can have an in-universe explanation.
And I was panicking, so.
Yeah.
Wait, sorry, there's a Loki season 2 coming and this Loki Echo show?
The other show is Echo, not Loki Echo.
I thought, wait.
Because my notes say Loki and Echo, but it's not a show. That's two different shows.
I thought you were telling me, I really got to start reading news myself. I thought you were telling me there's a Loki and Echo crossover. And the whole time I'm thinking, why would you cross over those two characters? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Well, I'll say this. I'm a lot more excited now that it's Loki season 2 and not a Loki and Echo crossover. I liked Loki.
It was probably, I don't know if it was my favorite of the MCU shows. It was definitely in the top 2 or 3.
Yeah.
But I love the concept of having, the concept of variance is an interesting one. Because you're saying these are both Lokis. But what is it that makes the two of them the same person, even though they're very different in many ways?
Sorry, I was just laughing at Dee Dee's comment. They have nanotech too, so recast is not a problem.
Yeah.
I like that. Nanotech just solves everything.
It is funny that it's like you're talking about serious issues and like what Jonathan Majors is being accused of and everything, but the article is like trying to assuage everyone's concerns by saying, "Don't worry, We have the multiverse concept. Like, it's the furthest thing from my mind. Like, we've done millions of recastings. Even in the MCU, we've done recastings without an in-universe explanation. Like, I'm not worried about that. But yes, I think there will probably be a multiverse, possibly nanotechnology explanation.
I was just picturing like you have some like scandal with the president or something, and the news reports are like, but don't worry, we can come up with an in-universe explanation for replacing the president.
Because we're all so used to cinematic universes now, we have to use that terminology in the real world. So we'll talk about Echo for a second. This is an interesting one. Go ahead.
What, are we gonna come back to Loki?
Here, okay, more Loki. Go ahead.
Well, no,
If you embarrassed yourself so much, I wanted to just move. It's like how with the Continental, they're trying to release all 3 episodes as quickly as possible, move past it. I was trying to do that for you with Loki, but go ahead.
So first of all, I liked Loki. I thought it was a fun show. I had complaints about it, but generally it was fun. I thought the whole concept of the TVA was just really cool. And I love the whole surreal feeling of that universe. And then especially when he meets, like, spoilers for Loki, like when he meets like the timekeepers and stuff. Yeah. I just thought it was so cool. And like the Loki actor and the character are just like a lot of fun. So I liked it. I'm excited to see more in that universe.
That multiverse.
There's a no, I'm just kidding.
The thing that I always look for in the MCU that gets me excited, a lot of people complain they're all the same, every movie in the MCU. Obviously, that's not literally true, but tonally, they all do start to feel pretty similar. And when something can stand out, that's exciting. I thought Loki did that to an extent. It's that weird tone you talked about. Part of that was just the score. It had this weird, the kind of score you would expect to see in a strange sci-fi movie, kind of like Blade Runner, where it just makes it feel different. And I really like that. And all the stuff you mentioned are things I liked about that show. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to a second season.
Yeah. Do we need to talk about Echo?
Well, there's something interesting about Echo. First off, I was actually somewhat interested in this show. So Echo was, what exactly was her role on Hawkeye? She was a deaf assassin, an enforcer for the mob, the tracksuit mafia, and she worked for Kingpin. So she's spinning off into her own series, but here's the thing. They are releasing all the episodes at once, November 29th, 2023. Disney Plus has never done that. Every MCU show, every Star Wars show has been a week-to-week release. Now, why do you think they're releasing all the episodes at once?
Because the Continental already took the idea of doing it over 3 days.
Yeah, so we can beat that. When I'm here, my sources are telling me that it's a bad show. So they're just trying to just get it out there and just move on. Because that's one of the things with the binge model. Stranger Things, when it comes out, everybody talks about it for a weekend, and then nobody talks about it anymore. So it kind of just disappears. Grace Randolph, Beyond the Trailer, that show she does, she's the one who said that her sources are telling her that the show might just be really bad, so they're trying to just squeeze it out there.
I also think even a show that's not very good is more enjoyable when binged, right? Because if a show comes out weekly, everyone talks about it. And you could have that thing that happens with Adam where he watches something and then a day later, he's like, that was good. And 2 days later, was it really that good? And you start to reflect on it. But if it's just binged, there's a lot less reflection.
Yeah, you're less likely to drop off in the middle of the season. But the reasons I was interested in this show are I actually liked Hawkeye. That was one of my favorite MCU shows. Felt a lot more grounded. Partially because the main character doesn't have superpowers or nanotechnology. So it felt a little grittier. Not a lot. I'm not going to lie to you. It's not like a super gritty. It wasn't like Daredevil on Netflix or anything like that. But it felt a little different from the usual MCU fare, and I liked it. Not to mention that Echo is going to feature, I don't know how large of a role, but Daredevil and Kingpin are both going to be on that show. So that's pretty interesting, which might be part of the reason they're putting it out in the binge format so people can just skip ahead to the Daredevil parts.
They'll put chapter markers like we do for our videos.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to tie this in now. Better Call Saul. One of the writers in that show, Marion Dare, who, I don't know why, but when she worked on Better Call Saul, she went by Heather Marion. She was a writer. She wrote the episode Dedicato a Max.
Oh, that was a good episode.
It was a good episode. She's the showrunner for Echo.
So, interesting.
Yeah, so I'm not ready to say, the show's bad, so they have to put it all out at once. That's just what I heard. It's possible it's a decent show. There could be other explanations for why they're putting it out so fast. If you look at the release schedule, it might just be like, well, if we air it week to week, it's going to overlap with something else or compete with something else. It's hard to fit it in on the schedule, so let's just release it all at once. Or maybe it's a good show, but it doesn't have a lot of cliffhangers. So at the end of an episode, you don't feel like you have to see the next one. That was one of the things with Andor. I like that show. I actually haven't finished it yet, but it's a pretty slow start. And I think a lot of people dropped off in the middle of the season. But if they released it all at once, I think more people would have stuck with it. So there are other explanations for why you would release Echo in a binge format. It doesn't have to be a bad show.
Yeah, I really liked Andor. I actually binge watched Andor. And that show was weird because there were some like jumps between episodes later on that I think felt really jarring to me binge watching it as opposed to watching it weekly.
Like tonally it shifted?
Yeah. Like there were just tonally and like plot wise, like there were just kind of a few jumps that like were really jarring to me. And so anyway, I think you're right that there are a lot of reasons you might release a show all at once. And so we don't need to assume it sucks because of that.
In general, binge format versus week to week, where do you stand?
I definitely prefer week to week generally.
Why?
If it's a good show.
For the standard reasons of it keeps it in the zeitgeist.
Yeah.
It's fun to theorize. It's fun to discuss and dissect. Keeps the show alive and the conversation alive longer.
Yeah.
I used to be biased in that direction because we would do a lot of week-to-week coverage on the channel. So if it all comes out at once, you got to figure out what you're going to do. Do you just do one video that covers the whole thing? Do you try and like quickly go episode by episode? But we don't really do that anymore. So even if I remove that bias, I do think I still prefer the week-to-week. Like if I think back to when Lost was airing, I was in college and we would get together every week and watch it as a group. There was this whole communal aspect. And I think that goes away when you binge. It ends up being you in your mom's basement with your laptop on your stomach with a bag of Doritos and just watching 8 episodes in a row. And then at the end of the day, you feel bad about yourself.
Yeah, it does make me sad that like I feel like there still aren't that many shows where like I really look forward to it each week. Or like Better Call Saul was the last show where I was like hooked. Like every week I was so excited for the next episode. And now it's like, I don't know, Succession, I just like binge and we'll talk about it later. But I don't know, they're just like, I just feel like there aren't that many good week to week shows.
Yeah, I don't even know what's on, to be honest. Like if I was thinking about it the other day, I haven't watched network television in years. But the last network TV show I watched was probably like House on Fox. And I was like, what is the current House? What are the shows that people are currently watching on Fox or NBC, CBS?
That is crazy that those channels still exist and they're churning out the same type of content we watched when we were kids.
Yeah, I wonder how long it's going to last though. It's streaming nowadays.
Yeah, do you think are there young people still watching those shows, or are those mostly catering to like older people that just haven't switched to streaming?
Yeah, I honestly just have no idea. It's like pure speculation on my part. I think older people watch network TV because it's what they're used to. I mean, there are shows that I imagine the younger generation are still watching, like Family Guy, stuff like that. Those are still on, Fox. I don't know.
We should do some research at some point.
Daniel's Bits next week. I want you to dig into this.
All right. I'm going to figure out what's going on over there.
Do some investigative journalism.
I'm going to go undercover.
Hey, you go walk into an old folks home and dressed all in white like Jimmy McGill. Hey, what are you guys watching on TV? What's on NBC these days, huh?
I'm going to go really undercover. I'm going to be gone for the next 6 months. You're going to wonder where I am.
All right. Any other thoughts, Daniel, on Loki and Echo?
I'm excited for this crossover.
Yeah. All right, let's move on from that. All right, now we're in the in-between segment. We're between topics.
Is the next topic going to be Succession? Or is there another one?
Should we skip the creator trailer, or do you want to talk about that?
No, let's talk about that. Do you think maybe could I go use the bathroom before then?
Sure.
All right. I mean, it's been like an hour. That's how often Joe Rogan goes to pee during podcasts.
All right. Daniel is like Joe Rogan. All right, go ahead. Get out of here.
All right.
Go. I'll talk to the chat. Oh, yeah, thank you. Yeah. Apolock says, old people eat up Law and Order like catnip. Yeah. Law and Order, NCIS, all of those week-to-week, what do you call those, procedural shows. Yeah, DD prefers week to week. While we wait for Daniel, there was some late breaking news this morning. Not really late breaking for me because I didn't look at it until this morning. But apparently, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny premiered at Cannes Film Festival last night. And some of the reactions are coming in. At first, when I was looking at Twitter, just seeing what people said on social media, there was a lot of very positive praise. I saw one person say, not only is this the best Indiana Jones movie, but it might be the best Indiana Jones movie of all time. Then I started to see more tepid reaction. I saw this one really passive-aggressive headline. I forget where it was. It might have been Deadline, but it was like, Dial of Destiny gets a lukewarm 5-minute standing ovation. And I tried to picture, what does a lukewarm standing ovation look like? Are people standing, but you can tell they're they don't really want to be standing, and they're hesitant about it, like they're clapping, but not with as much vigor as they normally do. But the article explained that standing ovations are kind of a polite custom at Cannes Film Festival. So it's not actually a ringing endorsement. But anyway, reviews are actually starting to come in. So we have a preliminary Rotten Tomatoes score for Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. I've been refreshing it because more and more reviews are coming in. Daniel's approaching now, so I'll wait for him to sit down before I do the score reveal. In the meantime, you'll find out. Apolock says, who utilizes music better in their movies, Wes Anderson or James Gunn? I'm tempted to say Wes Anderson just because I feel like James Gunn, I love the music in his movies, but it feels like a little too easy. The characters listen to music, so there's an in-universe explanation for why you just have fun playlists.
What's the word for that?
Oh, diegetic.
I love that
word.
So
diegetic refers to things that are actually happening in the universe of the movie. But when you have score, i.e. we hear it, but the characters don't, that would be non-diegetic. But Daniel, I was just building up to the reveal of the current Rotten Tomatoes score for Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. It premiered at Cannes Film Festival last night. So we currently have, I'm going to hit refresh. Go ahead.
Coffee?
I already
you put the coffee?
You need the coffee. It wonders why it's to get up every 60 minutes.
This is my third cup.
So we have 16 reviews are in the books for Dial of Destiny. What do you think that score is at right now?
It's called Dial of Destiny?
Yeah.
How many episodes or how many reviews?
16.
It premiered at Cannes?
Yeah.
I thought Cannes is like usually like independent films or like smaller films.
I think a lot. I don't know. I'm not going to pretend I know.
Okay.
I think a lot of these film festivals they'll have a few big headline movies and then also a lot of independent, the kind of movies you would normally associate with a film festival.
100%.
44%. This morning it was at like 23% or something, but it's been slowly crawling up. So it might land at a kind of mixed. I will say though, the people who are having a positive response to it are having a really positive response. While you were up, I saw a tweet last night where someone said it's one of the best movies of all time.
The Indiana Jones movie?
I saw your reaction.
Wait, what was that's like people who say The Flash, it's the greatest superhero movie of all time. Except for the Christopher Nolan movies.
Yeah, I kept seeing that for The Flash. Everyone's saying it's one of the best, it's the best superhero movie of all time. And I was like, I don't believe you. Looking at those trailers, I just don't believe you. And finally, I saw the accurate version of the tweet, which says the unspoken part out loud. It goes, Nolan aside, it's the best superhero movie of all time. Omar, by the way, is clearing up some of the mystery. Network television is dozens of crime procedurals these days.
That makes sense.
That's my impression. Yeah. All right, shall we go to our next topic?
Let's do it.
They just came out with a trailer for The Creator, the latest movie from director Gareth Edwards, not Gareth Evans. He's the guy who directed The Raid. Gareth Edwards is probably most well known for Godzilla 2014 and Rogue One in 2016. And it's funny, they tout in the trailer that he's the director of Rogue One, But that was kind of a weird situation because Tony Gilroy came in very late in the game, did a ton of reshoots. It's unclear how much he changed the movie after Gareth Edwards. But I remember walking away. I was about to say walking away from that as if I was like on set, my experience. But all the coverage of it gave me the impression that Tony Gilroy kind of had to fix that movie.
That was a good movie, wasn't it?
Yeah, and that movie led right into Andor, very similar tone.
Yeah.
I remember thinking Rogue One was my favorite of the new Star Wars movies, more than Force Awakens, more than Last Jedi, if you can believe it.
I don't even remember, like, that whole trilogy, I like the side stories like Rogue One. The main trilogy, I like don't remember anything from it. Like nothing about it like stuck out for me.
Yeah. Yeah, same here. And I think part of it is just there's so much content, Daniel. None of them have a chance to shine, you know?
I thought maybe it was just that it wasn't good.
No, you're wrong. So, yeah, anyway, I mean, Rogue One aside, I don't know how much Tony Gilroy had to fix that movie or whatever. Gareth Edwards, though, I have a positive opinion of him. I thought Godzilla was decent. So I'm interested to see what else he can do. And they just came out with this trailer for The Creator. What did you think of this trailer?
I thought it seemed cool. I was really excited at the beginning of the trailer because they introduced this idea of like, I love the idea of this, like the general announcing, look guys, like the AI we created to like protect us, it turned on us and we're all going to need a fight. Sorry guys. Like I thought that was kind of cool seeing that actual announcement and some of just the sequences of the action and stuff, like fighting these like robots. I thought looked really cool. I like that there was sort of a space element. Like he was talking about going to like an island in the sky and we saw these structures around the earth. I thought that was really cool. When it shifted to like the secret weapon is this like little girl robot that looks like his daughter, and then somebody was telling him that he has to kill her and stuff, I got like much less interested. Yeah. It just, I don't know. It just felt silly to me.
Yeah, we went down the exact same journey with this trailer.
Yeah.
Because at the start of it, first I rolled my eyes a little because of that line where it's like, heavens for good people. I could never go there. I'm like, okay, you're dark and broody, very cool. But then you get to the AI announcement. And we were just talking earlier about how much we'd want to see a new take on Terminator where you lean more into the AI side of it, understand a little more of what actually happens there. And it looks like, hey, we're seeing that. Almost to the point of, this is like a ripoff almost. Like we're literally seeing the rise of Skynet. But it looked cool. Then halfway through, it turns a little more into District 9. Where now it's, okay, the AI are the good guys, and we need to kind of protect this kid. That was the impression I got.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's got to protect him. He's starting to see that actually the humans are the bad guys.
Yeah, because we start to see all these like little robot kids also.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is interesting, but the vibe I got is that once you get to that point, it's almost no longer relevant that they're AI. It's more like here's a group of persecuted people that need to be protected, and now it's going to be an action adventure about protecting them. And I just don't want to lose that sci-fi element. And not just because I want to see more sci-fi, but also because that other story is one we've seen before.
Yeah.
And it feels a little bit generic. So I thought the trailer, it was almost like 50% looks cool, looks a little exciting, and 50% feels kind of generic. I can't tell if this is going to I can't tell how much is this going to be sci-fi or how much is it just a sci-fi premise as a springboard for an action adventure movie. That's what I'm not sure of. But I'm still intrigued by the movie. We'll see what that Rotten Tomatoes score is. And the audience reception. I don't always just agree with the critics.
We were talking earlier about like all these interesting directions you could take like the Terminator in, but like for this movie, like The Creator, and it sounds like this isn't what it's going to be, but like, and you've talked about this in your videos before about how it's nice to see sometimes just like archetypal common stories retold, like a good underdog story. Like I would love to just watch a movie that's like the first half of that trailer, which is AI turns on us, it tries to kill us all, humanity goes underground, fights for their lives, and wins. Like that is just a good, fun story to tell. Mm-hmm. Like I would love to just see a movie that tells that story.
Do we need to see another movie about how we're all the bad guys? Like in a sense, I know that some of the comments I've seen are that AI is not the problem. It's people. Like even for Terminator, we created the AI and that's just a tool. So ultimately, we're the ones who destroyed the world. But I don't know where I'm going with that.
But,
Basically, what you
yeah.
just described, like I'd much rather watch that movie. And now this version that they're telling, where it's about protecting this group of people, that could, I mean, like we've seen it before, it could still be good. But there's nothing in the trailer that said to me, we're going to do it better than you've seen before. Or this is going to be a great telling of that story. That's kind of how I felt about Avatar. Like in defense of that movie, a lot of people complained we've seen this story before. But the point that I go back to a lot is there are themes that are worth revisiting over and over. And I just thought Avatar did a pretty good job at retelling that story with a fresh coat of amazing CGI paint. I'm not necessarily getting the impression that this is going to do that.
Yeah, and I guess like I'm just not as into these stories of like, and we're actually the bad guys or whatever.
Yeah.
Like it's just, I don't know, like it's just not enjoyable.
Yeah.
It serves a purpose, I suppose, you know, it does, but I don't know. It's always nice to just see some classic, fun underdog movies.
Yeah. So it's funny, when I first saw the trailer, I was like, I'm excited to talk to Daniel about this because this is a cool sci-fi, but it was on my second watch where I was like a little less excited. But like I said earlier, I'm still intrigued by this. I do think Gareth Edwards has talent. He's like, oh, thank God. Gil thinks I have talent. So I'm interested to see how this movie shakes out. I mean, you can't judge the movie by the trailer. For all we know, the movie is one thing. The marketing team makes it look like another thing. You know, they're choosing what to emphasize, what to cut out. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll go see it. Like any sci-fi movie, I'm not gonna skip.
Yeah, same here.
And one we didn't really say. I mean, visually, I thought it looked cool too.
Yeah.
Like,
visually it looked cool, and the use of Aerosmith's "Dream On."
The music was great.
Just a really cool tone for the trailer.
Yeah. Yeah. Generally the tone, like I liked, if that's actually the tone of the movie, I think that was intriguing as well.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Hey, last thing we have on the docket, Daniel, is Succession. Are you use the bathroom again or anything? Are you ready to talk?
Let me have a sip of coffee.
All right, let's have a sip. Let's
Just one more topic, and we can get through this.
Yeah, let's trudge through. This is the warning for everyone. If you don't watch Succession, or you're in the middle of watching it but you're not caught up, we're about to have a discussion about the final season so far and the final 2 episodes remaining. So if you don't want to get spoiled, get the hell out of here.
All right. I was waiting so long until the end of that sentence so I could make my joke. For those listening, because maybe they're listening on a podcast app, I did this very funny thing where I pretended to get up and leave after Gil said that.
I'll put in a little laugh track thing.
Do you want some more coffee or anything?
No, I'm pretty good. All right,
I feel very caffeinated.
Okay, good. I think we're ready for this. This is basically going to be like a pilot episode for whether or not we start a Succession podcast, which would only go
have
2 episodes.
Well, this would be the first, so 3 episodes, a trilogy, just like
the Continental. It all comes back.
All right. Well, so today we're going to be talking about Succession. You got there's an interesting message, Gil?
Interesting is a word for
it. Blocked somebody?
Yeah, I just blocked someone.
No. Did you ban the person or just block the message?
Banned him.
Okay. Was it mean or was it spam?
It was about you. He just really doesn't like you.
I'm used to it.
He said that we talk like media students instead of fans. It's like pulling teeth.
I think that's kind of
a compliment, actually.
Yeah. I'm a student of media.
Thank you, Cheekster. Cheekster says, thank you guys for the live stream.
Thank you.
Thank you for the comment. All right, you ready for some Succession?
Let's do it.
There are only 2 episodes left of Succession ever. So we thought this would be a good time to talk about the season so far. I mean, overall thoughts on the show. We've never talked about this show on live stream or even really with each other that much.
Yeah.
So this is going to be interesting. So we'll talk about the series overall. We'll talk about the season so far and these last 2 episodes that are coming up. How is this all going to wrap up? So I guess first off, let's just talk about the season so far, some of the highlights. First, just headline, how have you been feeling about the season so far? What are you liking? What are you not liking?
So I'm a lot more invested in the show the last few episodes. I felt like everything leading up to Spoiler alert, just make sure. Spoilers for Succession. Everything, like the episodes leading up to Logan's death, I felt like I just didn't feel that invested. And then I was like, okay, when he died, like the next episode, I was like very intrigued just to see sort of how things went. And then I felt like there was another kind of like lull where I just like wasn't that interested. And now these last few episodes, I feel really invested in it again. And I was wondering why that is. And I just felt like there's something about the plot that I've just not been that bought in on. And I think part of it is just that like Kendall and Roman just feel so stupid to me. Like this whole thing of trying to prevent the deal with Madsen, just like, it just, I don't know, it just felt dumb to me. But now in the last couple episodes, the stakes have just generally built. Like the fact that they're toying with an election just to prevent this deal going through, it still feels stupid to me in certain ways. But now it's like, okay, now this feels exciting and important and impactful, right? Like these two like stupid brothers and these stupid things they're trying to achieve have massive consequences. And so now I feel, I don't know, I feel very invested in it again. And some of the emotional conflict of like Shiv and Tom has like really come to a climax. And so I don't know, I feel very bought in again, but that's sort of, my investment has just sort of waxed and waned as the seasons progressed.
It's a challenging show, and everyone always gives the caveat before they talk about Succession. So I've been watching the show for a while, but I wasn't watching it like I watched Better Call Saul, where I also listened to a bunch of podcasts about it, did a podcast about it, read about it. So now I'm kind of catching up on all the discourse. And one thing I see is that anytime someone writes about Succession, they're like, let me caveat up front, if I met any of these characters in real life, I would hate them. These are horrible characters. But part of the magic of the show is they get you to empathize with them. But I do think there's something to that. One of the challenges is that I think part of the point of this show is that the characters really don't change at their core in terms of their values, in terms of their morals and the choices they make. Part of the point it's making, I think, is that their wealth and their power kind of insulates them from consequences. I think Kendall is one of the key examples of that, because when someone is an addict, what is one of the things that can get them to kind of wake up and start making improvements? Hitting rock bottom. His rock bottom should have been, I accidentally killed a guy. And he does sort of hit a rock bottom. He suffers some consequences, but ultimately he essentially gets away scot-free. That wouldn't happen for a quote unquote normal, a normie, a non-billionaire. So he doesn't suffer those consequences, and he's able to relapse, and he's able to basically go on and not change in any meaningful way. So one side effect of that is that between episodes, I don't find myself mulling over the show as much as I do with some other shows. Like with Better Call Saul, between episodes, I would be really worried for Jimmy McGill. What choices is he going to make? Versus this show, I wonder about their choices, but I don't worry about them as much because I'm not worried about their souls.
Yeah.
I'm sort of like, they're already tainted. They are bad people, and I don't think they're going to change. So there's not, the stakes aren't there as much.
Yeah.
But when I actually watch the show, they put me in the character's shoes, and they get into some really intense situations, and I feel what they're feeling. When Kendall is about to go on and give his living plus, which is one of my favorite episodes this season, the way that they kept making the joke about how am I supposed to follow that? He just promised eternal life. When he's about to go on stage and Carl is like, let me see those numbers. I'm nervous for Carl because he's got like 30 seconds as the CFO to be like, what numbers are you about to present? And then I'm nervous for Kendall because the CFO is barking in his ear when he's about to go on stage. And I feel it. So the show pulls me in. And then when I leave the episode, I kind of just walk away. You know?
I think there's something to, you're right. Like, it's just so entertaining in the moment. But yeah, because like the characters' souls don't feel like they're at stake. You're less bought into it in between episodes, but like the characters are so entertaining. Like even Carl, I love Carl.
He's so good.
Because he gives this, what's the term? He seems like this like nice uncle, right? But he's not, right? Like I love the way he threatens Kendall as he's getting like to go on stage. Like it's like a pretty savage threat that's very warranted, but he says it in his like sort of friendly, avuncular way.
Well, first he starts gently, because that's his usual tactic. Like when it's someone needs to do something he doesn't want to do it, he's like, you might be better suited for that after all. And so on the walk to the stage, he keeps telling him like, let me just see the numbers. I hear you've made some tweaks to them. And that's a good point that you're bringing up and that Dee brought up. This season has some really good comedy so far. That's the other big caveat you always see in discourse around this show. And I wasn't really into this show. I hated all the characters until I realized it's a comedy, which always feels reductive to me, because watch episode 3 of this season with a harrowing 27 minutes of these children realizing they lost their father.
Yeah.
It's a barrel of laughs. But the show definitely uses comedy a lot.
Yeah.
Anytime there's an opportunity for it, they lean into comedy, which I think is another part of why sometimes I don't feel myself as caught up with the show between episodes, because comedies usually don't leave you with lingering discussion, discourse, and thoughts. You go for some laughs and you walk away. But I definitely think the show is not just comedy. The way that Jesse Armstrong, the showrunner, put it, he said the show encompasses comedy. And I think part of that is because comedy is real. It's part of these characters' lives.
Yeah, and I think it sort of psychologically makes sense too, right? Is that these characters, they sort of like pretend like they don't take anything seriously a lot of the time. Guess who my favorite character is in this season?
Greg.
No. One more guess.
Roman?
Yes. I love Roman this season. I think we've really seen like a Roman glow up these last few episodes. But you're right, like characters don't change, right? Like Roman's core has not changed at all, but we're just seeing him do so much more. And I mean, the way the last episode ended, I thought was so cool that Roman just like really took charge, right? And he basically like helped put what's his name? What's the president?
Hold on. I keep forgetting
the president-elect.
So I wrote it down. Not Mattson. The bad guy.
Yeah. Anyway, like he basically puts that guy into the White House, or potentially, right? And Mencken. He basically helps Mencken get into the White House. He's like buddy with this guy, and like it was just so cool seeing like Roman in this seat of power now. And like his whole attitude is just so funny. It's this sort of nonchalant, F everybody else. Yeah. I'm just going to do this. Like he's threatening Connor for like 2 days straight, trying to get him to drop out of the race. Like he's just so nonchalant in the way that he's just trying to like push everything. And you know what it's coming from. And they show it to us at the end of not this last episode, but the one before it. It's all coming from, he just wants to be like his dad so he could feel like he gets his dad's approval.
Yeah, I think there's like 2 layers to the themes of this show. There's the almost personal moral philosophy of it, where it shows the consequences of these characters' actions to themselves. Like you look at Logan, and he ended up dying on an airplane, not surrounded by loved ones, but by people who all are there for transactional reasons. They have something to get out of him. It's a business relationship. That's one level. Then there's the other level, which is the more, I would say, satirical, saying things about society overall. And I think these characters, like if you took Roman, he's not, in other circumstances, if he were the same person, you wouldn't say he's the worst person in the world. But everything he does is amplified by the fact that he's in an unearned position of power and wealth. So he can make very emotional decisions where he's trying to earn his dead father's approval. So he's going to put somebody in power, or like very significantly shift the results of an election potentially. Kendall, he was on the fence. He wasn't sure what to do. Once he felt personally betrayed by Shiv, that's what makes the decision. So we don't normally look at a character making an emotional, rash decision and say they're a horrible person. But because of the circumstances he's in, because he's in that position of power, his tantrums have consequences for the entire nation, possibly the entire world.
Yeah, and that's a story we just keep seeing unfolding over and over in succession, right? With Roman, we've seen almost the exact same thing before with that rocket launch, where like he just like all these like engineers and like I guess astronauts, or maybe it was just like the technicians on the rocket just like die because he like
nobody died.
Really?
One person lost a thumb, I think, or a finger.
Oh, I thought like 10 people died.
No, that was one of my favorite moments. That's like when I fell in love with the show, because I was into it for the first season. And then when he sees the rocket blow up on his phone, he just makes this perfect face, puts the phone away, and just gets back to the party. But he just looks like white as a ghost. And then eventually when he learns that no one actually died, he's like, someone lost a finger. Oh, that's not that big a deal. And you can just see the relief. It would have been hard for me to love. I love the Roman character. He's just so fun. it would have been hard for me to have fun with that character if he was responsible for actual deaths.
Yeah.
I think some other things are going on too with him pushing for Mencken. Part of it is he's the one who kind of initially created the relationship with Mencken. And so he knows if they put him in the White House, then it's going to create a very powerful connection that he's in charge of. It will make him a lot like Logan.
He's sitting on the throne now.
Right.
And I think that's how it ended.
I think so. And I think that's a lot of why he's fighting for that power. Because like you said, it's going to make him like his father. It's going to give him that power. There is also a sort of a nihilistic lashing out, which I think he's always had a bit of that. And now it's amplified because he's pissed about losing his father. He's trying to like process this. I think these characters don't have a lot of emotional tools in their disposal. So he's going to process grief in a very unique way. And I think part of it is lashing out in a nothing matters, screw everyone else kind of a way.
Yeah.
Jesse Armstrong, again, the showrunner, he also brought up an angle, which is that Rome may be looking for a father figure. And he may look at Mencken as kind of his next father figure. And so getting a pat on the head from him of like, thank you, you're doing the right thing for me. That might also be playing into it.
I think so. And I think in a way, he's also just trying to be like his dad, to feel like he has his dad there, right? Because he kept saying like, well, this is what dad would have done.
Same when he was firing people.
Yeah.
Which again is another thing I loved in one of my highlights of the season.
And even then, just the fact that he's choosing the same political party that his dad would have.
Yeah, even though it's not for any ideological reasons, right? It's just, I think if Jimenez, I think is the opponent, if their campaign were more willing to say, we'll kill the deal, he might have gone with them, potentially. I think the line that kind of sums up that theme is when they start arguing over, every time Kendall, when you wanted chicken as a kid, you always had chicken. He's like, so because we had so much chicken when you were a kid, we have to elect a fascist. And it kind of takes that idea of like childhood trauma and just these emotional decision making, these broken people. Normally, we wouldn't hate them. We might sympathize with them more. But in the context they're in, when they have a temper tantrum, it can shift politics.
Yeah.
And now they keep making the point, if you listen to the behind the scenes interviews, to be clear, Mencken is not definitely elected. ATN has called the election for him, but there's still the Electoral College. There's still a legal process that has to happen, and it might not go that way.
Yeah.
Either way, they've still created a big wedge in politics.
Yeah, and just by creating this popular narrative that he is the president-elect, it can sway whatever cases might come, whatever, processes, all these things that are going to happen, right? You could imagine if they hadn't called it and then the Electoral College, they sort of flipped the vote because they're like, well, this is how they would have voted, right? That could have gone better if the narrative wasn't against them. But now there's like a narrative in support of Mencken, and so it's going to make it a lot harder to overturn it.
Exactly. Before we go on from this topic of a Roman firing people, I wanted to come back to that for a second. Firing Joy, totally justified.
So, okay, have we seen Joy before?
I think we have. This was one of those things I kind of missed on my first watching of the season because so they made this movie Calypsotron, like the hibernation or something.
Yeah.
And someone brought it up in the chat here.
And it was a disaster, right?
Yeah, DD, showing the Gojo people basically an unfinished MCU movie in the morning to tank the deal was hilarious.
That was so funny.
Yeah. But that's exactly what we were talking about earlier on the stream, where it's these movies get written, they're terrible, and then somehow they get made with this huge budget, and you watch it and you're like, I would have known that was awful.
Yeah.
And so I was honestly kind of satisfied seeing Roman finally go up to one of these people and say, you know what? No, you're fired. But that's a very David Zaslav move.
But I was a little confused because like he and Joy though were talking about, like Joy was bringing up her concern about the rightward lean of ATN. So was she just concerned about how that might influence like their film reception?
That was my impression.
Okay.
It was a branding thing of like people they don't like our brand and it might affect our movies. That was my impression.
Okay. And then Roman was saying, let's churn out the hits. Basically like, we're going to give you a bunch more money. Go make us a bunch of hit movies.
Yeah. And clearly she wasn't receptive to it. She was just like, yeah, whatever. Like not taking him seriously at all. And then he fired Jerry for the same reason. She wasn't showing him the respect that would have shown Logan. Now, having said all that, I do think Joy for Calypsotron maybe should have been fired, but not in that way. You walk away and you go through the proper process.
Oh, that's what he started the conversation by saying. He was saying who's getting fired over. Was it Calypsotron? He
Yeah,
said,
that's exactly right. Yeah,
oh,
who's gonna get fired for that just horrible movie?
yeah. And so he was kind of pissed off too because she was like, let's sidebar that. And he was kind of like, go F
Go
yourself.
F yourself. Another highlight of the season. I mean, we talked about Logan's death. I just wanted to talk about how amazing that episode
Yeah.
was. They made it feel really real. The fact that we didn't get a death scene, we didn't get last words, it felt as sudden as it does in real life. And you even see the difficulty in communicating exactly what's happening. Like, I loved one thing I think this show does really well is it doesn't shy away from these really vulnerable moments where in another show the characters find out their father died. You're with them for a few minutes, okay, cut, next scene. And we sort of miss some of that grieving period. Here, we are just with them for almost half an hour. And like Tom has to call and deliver this news. It's like, what is he going to say? And I thought they handled all that perfectly, where he just starts with, your father is very, very sick. He's not really sure how to say, like, I think he's dying.
Yeah.
And there's so much back and forth over, is he dead? He might not be dead. Roman goes into denial. Stop saying he's dead. That's a very mean thing to say. Stop. Just great to watch.
I loved, yeah, each character's reaction. I loved how Kendall starts trying to like business everything, right? He wants to like take care of stuff. He's like, all right, put on the pilot. Like now I got to talk to the pilot.
Yeah.
And I forget who is Logan's like sort of second in command guy, Frank. Yeah, and Kendall's talking to Frank, and Frank is just like, Kendall, I can't do that. He's like, why can't you put me on the phone with the pilot? And Frank has to be like, they're flying the plane, Kendall.
He calls
like,
him son.
Son, yeah. And like that was. There are these tender emotional moments in the show. And I mean, that episode was full of it. And you're right, they really slowed it down. I mean, it was an hour of watching them coming to the realization that their dad's dying.
Yeah, apparently they did a take of that entire sequence of events in one take. They shot 27 minutes straight, like a one-act play. And the funny thing is they shoot it on film, so you can't actually shoot for that long. So they had reels of film hidden throughout the set. So as they were following them around, they'd have to quickly change and switch to another camera. And I think they clearly didn't present it as one unbroken take. And they did mix from different takes. But I think they said a large majority of the shots came from that 27-minute uninterrupted take they did.
I love that because I think it obviously wasn't, we don't see it as one take, but it did feel very cohesive and immersive. And I think that's maybe a result of the way they filmed it. And I think it's really cool for the actors too, right? And that they get to be so immersed in that situation for like 30 minutes.
Right, because you get to a sort of climax of emotions. And then it's like, if you're just going to jump right back into the scene and say, okay, this is the part where you've been growing and how upset you are for the last 10 minutes. And now you're at the part where you start crying. Okay, go. Instead, you get to actually go through the entire range of emotions, the highs, the lows, and the buildup and everything.
And there's sort of, it's also hard, right? When you're filming, right? There are like particular shots, like, okay, this is the close up on this person, it's the close up on that person. But there's something so chaotic to this scene, right? Where there's a group of people on the plane, but then there's also this group of people at the wedding, right? Who are all dealing with this death at once, right? Like, yeah, filming it more like a play, you get to have that chaos of all of them there rather than these like individual close up shots and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So that was an incredible hour of television. We can jump around to a bunch of. We haven't talked much about Shiv and Tom.
Yeah.
This is another great example of just sticking with the vulnerability of these characters, where they have this 5-minute argument on the balcony at the tailgate party. And again, I feel like normally you wouldn't get to sit in a conversation that long, but it was such a great climax to all these things that have been bubbling under the surface. They never want to talk about this stuff. Earlier in the season, Tom said to her, like, we were supposed to have a big talk, and she sort of just doesn't want to do it. She said, what's the point of drudging all this stuff up? So that was really satisfying to see and very uncomfortable to see. And it's an argument on TV is at its best when both sides are essentially correct. Mm-hmm. They're both accusing each other of different things, and neither of them are wrong. And this show does a great job of kind of mixing motivations. So Tom keeps defending himself, saying, I'm with you because I love you. And I think we see at times that he does genuinely love Shiv. But it is also true that he was significantly motivated by her last name, her money, and the fact that she would be a ladder for his career. But I think both are true. In the same way that in the election episode, when Shiv is pulling for Jimenez and is saying, we can't make this call for Mencken, she presents herself as being on the side of the people and on the side of democracy, but it also happens to align with personally what she wants.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of very real, complicated mixing of motivations. And I think that was really on display in this fight between the two of them, because they can make accusations that are entirely accurate. You can be angry at both of them and be on the same side as both of them.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of think with both of them, we're seeing this issue where, like, all these characters are so flawed that they don't have, like, all the values these characters have are, like, completely antisocial, right? In that, like, for every character to get what they want, it just involves hurting other people, right? Like, basically, Roman wants to be on the throne, Kendall wants to be on the throne, Shiv wants to be on the throne, Tom wants to be on the throne,
right,
or he wants to suck up to whoever's on the throne, right? Like, none of these.
And Greg, if the throne happens to present itself to him.
Greg is kind of like the three-eyed raven guy in Game of Thrones. Bran, he's just gonna like end up there.
You're not the first one to make that comparison.
And so basically, right, like these characters, like all their desires are so toxic and sort of shallow that it prevents them from having meaningful, healthy relationships with other people. And so, like Tom and Shiv, like they both, you know, they have these things they're aiming after, which it doesn't allow them to be compatible with each other. And yet they've formed an emotional attachment to each other because they've been together for several years, right? And that's just like, that's going to happen, right? So they have this like really strong emotional attachment, but there's just no way for them to coexist like peacefully with each other. Like it's just not, it's completely flawed and impossible. And so they just keep hurting each other.
Yeah, I had the same thought. Everyone's relationships in this show generally are transactional. And one thing this show does really well is they actually get you to believe that maybe being a billionaire wouldn't be such a great thing, because anybody who talks to you has an ulterior motive. So nobody on this show has the emotional tools necessary to deal with an actual, real emotional bond. So when Shiv and Tom suddenly find that they have one, along with this transactional relationship they have, I don't think either of them knows how to deal with it, which means they're both going to get hurt, because you're going to do things that are contradictory to what you would do if you genuinely loved someone and wanted to be faithful to them. So yeah, that was a very emotional scene. Really well done.
And I loved, actually, I mean, there were a lot of good lines in that argument, but one that stuck out for me was Tom is like yelling at Shiv that like all Shiv has ever wanted was her father's approval, that he has given her tons of approval and it's done nothing for her because she's broken, right? Like that. She's just endlessly seeking approval from some, you know, person who's never going to give it to her. Right. And like, I think it's a really good description of basically all these characters.
Yeah, I was just
like
gonna say
all
that.
these characters are so broken. They, you know, especially the kids of Logan, that like, they just all have this unceasing need for approval from their dad that's never going to be filled up. And so no matter what they do, they're just always going to be empty and broken. And yet what's really interesting, and somebody sent a message about this, Connor and Willow weirdly have the most healthy relationship. They kind of do, where like Connor sort of, he makes this point that he's accepted there's no love in their family.
Yeah.
Right. And Connor is really a messed up character too, but he does seem to have some amount of like peace within himself. And I think it's almost like he's accepted the transactional relationship with Willa in a way where they've reached a transactional relationship that somehow does work, in that they both do emotionally satisfy their needs for each other.
I think a lot of it's the honesty of it.
Yeah.
Where she tells him safety is a lot of why I'm with you, the safety of power and wealth. But she said, but I'm happy. So both can be a little bit true. Versus Tom and Shiv, it took them a long time to finally talk this out.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's the honesty that they're clear in their emotional needs, and so they're actually able to achieve it. Whereas Tom and Shiv are just constantly lying to themselves and each other.
Yeah, exactly. Greg, we've mentioned him a few times. DD, who has a better story than Greg? With Game of Thrones reference.
So I love Tom telling Greg that information. It's like, I think he said it's like wine. You keep it bottled up until the right moment.
Just smash it over someone's
Yeah,
head.
yeah. And that's exactly what he does in the last episode.
What did he do in the last
So,
episode?
so
It's Shiv, right?
Shiv tells Kendall, "Yeah, I called Jimenez as guys. I got the feeling that they're on board."
Let's talk about that for a
Crazy.
second. The worst lie in the world. She says, "Don't worry, I called them." And then I loved the reveal where Kendall goes to do a follow-up call. So you know he's going to find out she didn't actually call. And the way they shot it, where you're just seeing Shiv's face, you don't even hear Kendall's conversation, but he makes the call, and then when he hangs up, you see the look on his face and him walking back. That's just a great example.
And Greg catches him, or Kendall catches Greg. So that's what else you see after the phone call is Greg explains to Kendall that Shiv's been siding with Madsen.
Right, exactly. But that would be like another one of those I'm about to walk on stage for the Living Plus kind of moment. These really that was my reaction in the first season where I wasn't sure if I was into the show or not. But once I saw they can put you in the shoes of the character. You connect with them enough that you feel a little bit of what they feel. And then they turn the stakes up so high, personally for the characters, because they want these things. And we understand that. And you get in these really intense scenarios, and you know you're going to reach some kind of resolution. And you're going to see every step of it. Like when Logan dies, you're going to see the 30 minutes of panic and grief that comes right after. So that moment of Kendall doing the follow-up call, there's a moment of that. But yeah, go ahead. You're talking about Greg.
No, I mean, yeah, Greg divulges that information. Greg, in a lot of ways, swung that election, right? Because he shared the information with Kendall at the right time that pushed Kendall over the edge.
Yeah, to basically say Shiv is working with Madsen and is essentially stabbing you in the back.
Yeah, and so then he decides, all right, screw my uncertainty. I'm siding with Mencken and with Roman.
Yeah. Any other highlights of the season or any other thoughts you have about Succession that we haven't already covered?
No, I mean, I think these last few episodes especially have been awesome.
Yeah. And one thing I want to add that I forgot to mention earlier is we talked a lot about how these characters don't really change. And that's part of the point of the show and also part of why it just doesn't stick in my head as much when I walk away from it between episodes. But because we are approaching the end, that does add some stakes to say that things might change. There might be some genuine consequences for these characters. Like if they're fighting, the vibe I'm getting is that we're going to go towards some kind of tragedy. I think Logan is a small preview of where this lifestyle leads, right? Dying alone, essentially. So one scenario is that Rome and Kendall win. They get to keep Waystar and ATN, but they realize they've basically held on to a dying medium in a dying empire. And I just hope it doesn't end on that note, though, of like, they got screwed over and it's over. I do hope we get to see some of the consequences. And that's why I liked Logan dying so early in the season rather than ending with that. You get to see what happens next. I guess this is a long way of saying, I hope we see some kind of change or some kind of reckoning for these characters of really seeing, here's how I'm flawed and here's why that's bad and how I'm paying for it.
Yeah. I'm kind of skeptical. I don't know. We have 2 episodes. Let's see if.
Yeah, it is only 2 episodes. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Shiv is the closest to that so far, in that she's now kind of lost her brothers because she betrayed them. She's kind of on the losing side now, it seems, and she's pregnant with Tom's child, and Tom doesn't even believe her. Right when she tells him, Tom's like, "Is this another tactic?"
Yeah.
So she's very alone and vulnerable now.
And I do also think, I believe that Shiv, although she often has mixed motivations, I do think she has some values that she feels were pretty horribly violated with Mencken's, with them calling it for Mencken. So that would be an example of seeing the consequences of her family and to some extent her choices.
Yeah, I mean, she threatened to go public about everything that happened in that room.
Yeah. And that would obviously tear them apart. And it does feel like we're sort of at the climax of these characters' relationship. Like, as brothers and sisters, at least Shiv versus Kendall and Roman, it feels like that is irreparably broken. And in terms of real relationships for these characters that aren't transactional, even though sometimes it is transactional, but the sibling bond is probably the realest thing they have. And if that's breaking, and ultimately does break, that would be sort of a real consequence for the first time in their lives.
Yeah.
Omar says not much time left, but final episode is 90 minutes long.
Cool.
Daniel, any other thoughts on Succession going into these last 2 episodes? Who do you want to see on the throne? Anything else you want to say?
Greg, for sure. He has the best story.
Yeah.
No, I don't think anything else. I think, I'm really excited to see where it goes.
Yeah, same here. Hoping for the Tom and Greg spinoff. Better Call Saul style spinoff.
That'd be awesome. Maybe we should film it ourselves.
All right, keep an eye out for that. All right, that's it for Succession. Anything else for the live stream?
Let me have a sip of coffee, see if I think of anything.
Okay.
We've been going for a while, but I feel very caffeinated, so I feel like it was easy to go for an hour and 45 minutes.
Yeah, we're only about halfway through the stuff I wanted to cover.
Oh, what else do you have?
No, I'm just kidding.
All right, I think that might be it.
All right, let's wrap it up then. So we're doing this every week, every Friday, roughly 10:30 a.m. We're live streaming, so make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you've got that bell icon checked so you get notified when we go live. Ooh, any sumo or chimp facts this week? Daniel, you got to have something. Come on.
Sumo. We got a sumo fact.
The May tournament is going on right now. You can check out Sumo Jason, I think is the YouTube channel. He's an English speaker, lives in Japan, and he kind of explains everything that's happening sumo wise.
Yeah.
I haven't watched much of his stuff, but I intend to check it out.
You negotiated that sponsorship deal with Sumo Jason, right?
Yeah, I'll be talking to Sumo Jason later today. There is amateur sumo wrestling in the U.S., so somebody did tell me I have hope, because I was bemoaning the fact that I'll never get to be a sumo wrestler. But if there is amateur sumo in America, I can't say there won't be a One Take special documentary.
Every week you're just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. You're going to stop fitting on set.
All right, I think
You're going to have to be eating during recording.
I think that's a great place to wrap it up. So thank you everybody for joining the live stream, being part of the conversation. If you haven't checked out my Evil Dead Werba, Adam texted, that's what Evil Dead is really about. I forget, people don't know that acronym. Adam texted me at 3:44 a.m. last night, and he said, what Evil Dead is really about is awesome.
Yeah, and that's a ringing endorsement. It's very hard to impress Adam. Most of the time when Gil releases a video, Adam says, what is this crap?
Yeah, it's normally what he says.
Yeah.
So let's wrap it up there.
And if we're also on the podcast apps. If you're just listening to us on YouTube, please subscribe on the podcast app. Leave a positive review on the podcast app. It's really easy. You can just click 5 stars or 4 stars if you think, it's like 5 stars. Click 5 stars. Really easy, and it really helps us.
Yeah, if you're sick of this assault on your eyeballs.
Yeah.
Just check out the podcast apps and you can just listen to us.
And we love doing this every week, but if we get like a few negative reviews, we'll probably stop.
Yeah, so if you want to kill this thing,
yeah,
you have the power. You have as much power as the Roys, in as much as, let's wrap it up there. So thank you for watching.
And see you on the next One Take.
That was a pretty clumsy ending there. Let's redo that. Okay, ready?
Wait, are we still live?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so
thanks.
Thank you for watching, and see you on the next One Take.